We're following new developments on the Trump camp attacks with Russia. Multiple official sources now telling CNN that high-level Trump aides were in constant communication with suspected Russian intelligence operatives during the course of the presidential campaign. We're joined now by the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Wolf.
What do you know about these conversations between Donald Trump's aides during the course of the campaign and high-level Russian intelligence operatives?
Well, this is going to be a key part of our investigation in the House Intelligence Committee. There's a lot to look at in terms of the Russian influence operations. We're going to look at what the FBI's response was. We're going to look at how they used paid media and trolls. But we're also going to look at the issue of collusion. Were there contacts between Trump campaign officials? And I can't confirm or deny these reports, but I can tell you this is something that is very much of interest and has to be investigated. I think that's really one of the most serious allegations to surface since the election.
Do you believe that now President Trump, then candidate Trump, knew about these conversations?
Well, here's the thing, and I was saying this at the time of the campaign. Now President Trump, then candidate Trump, called openly for the Russians to hack Hillary's email server. So he did this quite overtly. The question is, was he also doing this covertly through surrogates? And that is something that we will have to investigate. But what is really shocking at one level is he was asking for this quite openly.
Do you believe he actually directed his national security advisor, the fired Michael Flynn, to tell the Russians that the Trump administration would roll back the sanctions imposed by then President Obama, including the expulsion of 35 Russian diplomats, shutting down some locations that the Russians have here in the United States, among other sanctions?
You know, I don't know is the answer, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me. This is consistent with the president's view of things and view of Russia, his desire to do away with any impediment to our relationship. But also, if you take him at his words today, that he thinks Mike Flynn is a wonderful man and that he's been mistreated, that also suggests that he was acting appropriately. He was acting, at least if not the direct wishes of the president, certainly aligned with what the president wanted to see happen. So it wouldn't surprise me if he or others in the administration had Flynn do this. It would be exceptional for Flynn to be acting as a complete free or rogue agent, having these conversations, making these implicit suggestions that they would ease sanctions. And of course, the Russians appear to have acted on Flynn's suggestions. They didn't respond. They didn't retaliate. Very out of character for Russia. And of course, that begs the question, was this based on a deliberate policy coming out of the White House?
Are there transcripts or recordings, as far as you know and what you can share with us, of these conversations that Trump officials had with Russian officials during the course of the campaign?
We are going to ask for these, and I expect that we will be provided them. We're going to have to get the cooperation of the FBI if we're going to be able to do this investigation. But also, members of the Gang of Eight are given periodic counterintelligence briefings when they involve U.S. persons. And obviously, this is a very important counterintelligence investigation that involved a very important U.S. person. So I would fully expect, if there are transcripts, that Congress will get them.
When we say there were constant communications going on during the course of the campaign between Trump officials and Russian officials, do you have a sense of how often they were communicating? What does that mean, constant communication?
You know, I can't speak to anything in the investigation at this point. I can only comment on the public allegations. You know, certainly if there were high contacts between top Trump surrogates with Russia at a time where Russia is hacking and dumping documents, at a time when candidate Trump is calling for Russia to hack Hillary Clinton's email server and saying they will be rewarded by the press if they do, it would be surprising if you had top-level surrogates in conversation with the Russians if they weren't discussing this. After all, their candidate was calling for this.
The transcript of the conversation that Michael Flynn had with the Russian ambassador in Washington that's caused this uproar, have you had access to that? Because you're a member of what they call that Gang of Eight.
I have not yet. We are requesting this, and I fully expect that the Gang of Eight will have access to this. We should, in order to do our jobs. But I'd like to see that shared with the intelligence communities. Ultimately, I'd like to see it shared with the American people. This administration misled the American people about those private conversations. The Vice President of the United States went out unknowingly, I think, but misled the American people. And I think the people have a right to see exactly what the truth is.
The whole notion, when we spoke earlier in the week, is you also raised the possibility that in addition to the actual phone conversations that Flynn had with the Russian ambassador, there may have been encrypted communications. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I don't know if there were encrypted communications, but we do know, if we can rely on it, Sean Spicer said that, in fact, in addition to the phone calls, General Flynn also texted the Russian ambassador. We ought to look at all those communications, whether they're encrypted or not. Certainly, if there were any encrypted communications, and again, I don't know that there were, but that would tell us something about his consciousness of wrongdoing. After all, he's communicating with the Russians. He's not trying to conceal it from the Russians. So the question is, who was he trying to conceal it with if those platforms were used?
Looking back, for the election on November 8th, should the FBI have disclosed to the American public that there were these contacts going on?
Well, I think that the FBI should have disclosed, indeed the administration should have disclosed the Russian hacking earlier than they did. And as you recall, Senator Feinstein and I were pushing for that.
They did in early October. I think it was October 8th. They did that. The election was a month later.
Yes, they did. I think it may have been the 7th, but in early October,
7th, yeah.
they did make that disclosure. Whether they should have gone beyond that to disclose anything more, they probably wanted to make sure that they were on firm ground with whatever they shared with the American people. So every line of that statement was carefully parsed to make sure they could back it up, and I think that's the right call.
Should the FBI director, James Comey, though, have told the American people what was going on in these communications between Trump officials and Russian intelligence operatives?
I think Director Comey should have joined that statement of attribution. After all, the FBI is one of the key agencies that makes attribution, so it was notable that he left his name off that. And I don't think we've ever had a satisfactory answer about why he did so, particularly when he was so willing to speak about the Clinton investigation.
One final question. The tweet that he did this morning, at Real Donald Trump, this is the President of the United States. Information is being illegally given to the failing New York Times and Washington Post by the intelligence community, NSA and FBI, just like Russia. When you saw that, what was your reaction?
Well, you know, many reactions. Here he is, he's picking another fight with the intelligence community. It doesn't have enough problems with, I think, the lack of confidence in the commander-in-chief at this point. So this is undoing any effort he made, as ill-fated as it was when he visited the CIA, but also that he would now compare with Russia. This country he has such admiration for, apparently, is an odd comparison to make. So to unravel in that single tweet, but it probably says a lot more about this president than it does about any of the facts.
Better than comparing it to Nazi Germany, the intelligence community, which he had earlier.
It's all relative.
Yeah. All right, Congressman Adam Schiff, thanks very much.